You don't realize you're being pulled out of yourself at first, because gaslighting never begins with loudness, it begins with subtlety, with small doubts planted gently, with your memory questioned softly, with your emotions reinterpreted as overreactions. And soon the ground beneath your feet shifts by degrees so small you barely notice, until one day you find yourself standing in a life where you apologize for things you didn't, to doubt feelings that were real, and defend a person who keeps rewriting the truth to suit their comfort. And by then the confusion feels familiar, and the familiar begins to feel normal. You tell yourself you're just being sensitive, or dramatic, or too emotional, not because you are, but because someone has taught you to mistrust your own experience. And what is heartbreaking is not just that someone twisted your reality, but that you began twisting it too, bending it inward, folding it smaller, reshaping it until your truth fit inside their version of events. Because losing yourself felt safer than losing them. And this is how gaslighting works, not in explosions, but in quiet erosion, in the gradual undoing of your self-belief. A Stoic would look gently at this and say, "You have given your inner authority to someone who has not earned it," not as an accusation, but as a soft reflection of a deeper truth that you were seeking clarity from someone who benefited from your confusion, and he kept reaching for understanding from someone who preferred your uncertainty. And you tried to anchor yourself to a person who kept moving the shore every time you got close. It is not weakness that makes people stay in such dynamics. It is hope and empathy, and the deeply human desire to be understood. Because gaslighting thrives not on ignorance, but on compassion, on your willingness to consider someone else's point of view so deeply that you slowly forget your own. And the tragedy is that you were punished for the very qualities that make you a good, feeling, conscious being. But then something happens, not an explosion, not an argument, not a grand revelation, but a quiet moment of clarity. A moment where your inner voice, the one that has been whispering beneath the noise, finally becomes louder than the confusion, and it tells you, this isn't truth. This isn't peace. This isn't love. And that moment becomes the beginning of freedom. Because freedom doesn't begin with leaving, it begins with seeing. And seeing clearly is the first act of liberation. Because once your sight returns, the spell breaks, the fog thins, and suddenly the things that felt normal start to feel wrong again. And the things that felt like your fault begin to reveal themselves as someone else's projections. The Stoics taught that clarity is courage, because clarity forces you to choose yourself in a world that has convinced you to choose someone else's comfort. And as you begin to reclaim your own perception, your own judgment, your own inner compass, you feel the ground steadying beneath you, not all at once, but inch by inch, moment by moment, truth by truth. And this reclamation is tender. It is not a battle, but a returning, a gathering of the pieces of yourself that you handed away in moments of doubt. A quiet homecoming to your own mind, and you realize that the freedom you longed for was never outside you. It was the strength to trust your own experience again, without asking for permission. Leaving the fog of gaslighting is not about anger. It is about awakening, because anger burns quickly, but awakening lasts. And as you awaken, you notice your body relaxing, your thoughts sharpening, your heart steadying, and you begin to breathe differently, as if you've been underwater for too long and have finally surfaced. You stop explaining yourself to someone who never listened, and you start listening to yourself again. You stop rehearsing arguments in your mind, and you start reclaiming silence. You stop searching for the version of them you hoped for, and you start honoring the version of yourself you forgot. The shift from gaslight to freedom is not a single decision. It is a slow stitching of your soul back together, a quiet reaffirming of your reality, a gentle promise to yourself that you will no longer abandon your truth to preserve someone else's story. And each step into that freedom feels like an exhale you have been holding for years. And eventually, the peace that once felt impossible begins to feel natural. The doubt that once consumed you begins to fade. The truth that once felt fragile becomes your foundation again. And you realize that freedom isn't loud, it's steady. Grounded.com. A soft certainty within you that cannot be undone by someone else's denial. You rise not with triumph, but with clarity. Not with rage, but with self-respect. Not with bitterness, but with boundaries. Because the opposite of gaslighting is not revenge, it is self-trust. And self-trust is the quietest and strongest form of liberation. And when you finally look back, you do not see a story of shame, You see a story of awakening, of courage, of returning to the truth that was always yours, and you understand deeply honestly that freedom was not the moment you walked away, but the moment you believed yourself again.